One moment, you're crossing a river gorge, high in the Rocky Mountains. The next, you're rolling through the gentle English countryside. Then you round a bend and steam into a 19th century western boomtown. It is a journey as real as the wheels you feel rumbling beneath you, as thrilling as the whistle of a far-off locomotive. It is a tour through your imagination and San Diego's magical garden railways.
A garden railway can be quite a hobby. It can be time-consuming, it can be pretty expensive, it can be a real challenge. But it can also be a lot of good old-fashioned fun. Vince and Sherry Basse always seem to remember that last part. This is the Wagner and Rio Vista Western Railroad Company. The names come from a corner in Anaheim where Vince was raised. He simply thought it sounded like a railroad. And while the name is part of his memories, the theme is straight out of his imagination.
The theme of the railroad is the Depression-era 30s. And if you look closely on the boxcar, it's got the similar logo as the Denver and Rio Grande, but it's the scenic route to the far side, being a Gary Larson fan, so I have a lot of fun with it.
There's that word that keeps coming up when you talk with Vince Basse, fun. He had Lionel trains as a boy and thought they were fun, so this seemed like a good idea. He loves trains, but says now he enjoys the gardening part even more. The Basses don't seem to take their layout or themselves too seriously. They call it a narrow-gauge railway operating on a shoestring budget over a just longer than shoestring length of track. That description seems a little humble. This is one of the Basses' favorite parts of the Wagner and Rio Vista. This is Leakin Creek. Tongue planted firmly in cheeks, they insist Leakin is a local Indian word which means, where's that water coming from?
I just enjoy the fact that I've got running water in it. That was one of my goals, and I'm glad I've achieved that. I've even thought of extending the water to put a bigger falls in and a bigger river, but that'll have to wait. It's so much fun to do that, and it's such a pleasant sound that I really enjoy that. And we enjoy just sitting out here when the railroad's running and just puttering around the yard and watching the dogs play and having the train roll around, and especially when it gets dark and you see the lights come on and everything looks right. It's very relaxing.
Relaxing and, oh yes, fun. That's what the Wagner and Rio Vista Western Railroad Company is really all about.
At Dan and Anita Brown's, you'll want to grab a glass of lemonade and settle in on the porch to watch their steam and battery-powered trains roll past at ground level. In 1991, after a trip to the Del Mar Fair and a viewing of what LGB and the Garden Railroad Society had set up, they decided to tear out their rose garden and start the A&D line. They're gradually replacing some of their early plastic buildings with redwood structures.
Set in the eastern Sierras, the A&D line features a diversified landscape. Overall, the layout features more than 54 varieties of trees and cacti. The numbers grow with each find of that perfect scale plant. The Garden Railway is something that Dan and Anita can do together. Anita thrives on the details, including finding and caring for all of the scale landscaping, while Dan prefers doing all of the engineering.
Take a ride on the Cajon Railroad, and within a few seconds, you're convinced it's not a garden railroad at all. Oh no, this is most definitely a time machine. Suddenly, Ed and Faye Broz's amazing layout has taken you back 100 years into the mining town of the late 1800s. Don't just look at everything around you and appreciate the incredible detail. You have to do more than that. You have to listen as well. You can hear the sounds of the ranch just outside town. You can hear the raking in the garden. You can even hear the sound of the saloon piano, luring thirsty miners. The Cajon Railroad is a history lesson, a work of art, and a hobby all rolled into one. And to hear Ed Broz tell it, well, most of what you see here just sort of happened.
My wife wanted a ranch house, so we started with her ranch house, which was Faye's ranch. And I said, well, I want to have a stockade over here. So I had a stockade, and she said, well, I want a little station called Pleasantville. So that's how she got her little station called Pleasantville. And then I said, well, I've got a boulder over there on the other far side. I don't know what to do with it. We'll just make it a station stop. And so that became Boulder Junction. And then I had the back area, which was totally a mess. And I said, I've always wanted to do a mine because I've gone out to Calico Mine out in the Barstow area, and I saw how they did stuff out there years and years ago when they were digging for silver. And so I said, well, I think I could do something. And then there was a lot of other pictures that I had for old mining areas and towns. So I went ahead and started on that. And that finally grew and grew.
And grew and grew, and, well, you get the idea. And as it grew, Ed and Faye took the time to get everything just right. From the majesty of the cathedral rock, fashioned with tons of stone and decomposed granite, to the tiniest detail, most of the buildings were made from redwood. Many have finished interiors. Some have lights, others smoking chimneys. It's all so lifelike, you could almost hear kings being crowned on the checkerboard. The Cajon Railroad is quite an experience. Everywhere, another sensational view. Another perfect recreation of a long ago time. But what else would you expect when traveling in a time machine?
Climb aboard Gene and Kim Cook's Bonita Valley Short Line Railroad. And in seconds, you leave Southern California behind and head for the Rockies. Using two interconnected loops and about 500 feet of track, the Bonita Valley Short Line wanders through trees and fascinating rock formations. The use of a lot of rock creates varying elevations and grade changes throughout the railway. It also gives you a real sense of being in the mountains. The special look and feel here is certainly no accident. It took a lot of planning and hard work.
The track plan, a lot of hours. It almost seems like there's more hours spent planning it than building it. Used a LGB template and a lot of paper, and just kept going for elevation changes, getting the most you can in the space without looking too busy, and concentrating on viewpoints, special curves and close corners, and of course get your tunnels and things in there.
Cook will tell you he likes the planning, the building, and simply moving the dirt as much as running the trains. The Bonita Valley short line winds through canyons, along the edges of cliffs, and to the tops of mountains. A trip on the short line is like a run from Durango to Silverton. The elevation changes allow for the use of well-planned tunnels, bridges, and trestles, all of which lead to a multi-level experience. Gene Cook created the Bonita Valley short line almost entirely with his own hands. He likes working outdoors with real trees and rocks he gathers in the local mountains. He'll also tell you he's always thinking ahead, already planning that next change just up around the bend.
Is it possible to physically be in two places at one time and to appreciate and do justice to both of them? Well, when you're riding the Rose Canyon Fault Line, the answer is a resounding yes. This railroad, named with good humor after the earthquake fault which runs near the home of Frank and Pat Curtis, seems somehow to have combined Southern California with Europe. And that's as it was intended, because Frank and Pat live here. But many of their fondest memories are of English countryside.
I guess it's our heritage. We're trying to recreate a little English scene and our memories of our childhood in England. And we wanted the green landscape and the rolling hills and, of course, the flowers. And we just keep thinking up new ideas. The first building I did was Rose Cottage. And I keep adding little things. I think of new things to put in the garden, and we enjoy doing that.
And that enjoyment certainly shows. The detail is spectacular. You can almost feel a cool breeze blowing through a quiet Welsh village. And nearby, a country railway station with an unusual name, unless, of course, you remember that idea of being in two places at once.
The name of the station is we've called Aberclemente, which is a mixture of Welsh and local. Aber in Welsh means mouth of a river, and this is Clemente, San Clemente Canyon down here, so Aberclemente is a suitable name for the station.
It all works. The name of the station, the combination of two very different places and cultures. And while the Rose Canyon Fault Line is certainly designed to replicate Great Britain and parts of Europe, don't think for a moment that some of the inspiration isn't homegrown. Look in one direction and you can appreciate the Rose Canyon's rolling stock, even as its big brother passes by down below. And if it somehow reminds you of a special spot that you visited on a vacation once, well, that's the whole idea.
But also, people who've been to Europe, they comment, they say, this is just as I remember it, with a village in the distance. And that feeling, and the bridges, the stone arch bridges and the waterfalls.
By now, you must be convinced that at least one law of physics just doesn't hold true. You can be in two places at the same time, and you can love them both when you climb aboard the Rose Canyon Fault Line.
this is different and special and pretty amazing. It is all those things, but it most definitely is not a garden railway. For nearly 30 years now, Rudi Enners has been putting together this incredible layout, all of it indoors. And he has remodeled almost his entire home to accommodate his passion for model trains. 2 guest rooms and a 3-car garage are all gone. In their place, there is this. Travel Rudi's railroad. Walk with him through his home. It's a bit like traveling the world. He'll take you back into America's Old West, and then you'll walk over to another area and go back even farther.
And this is Europe over here, the turn of the century, beginning of 1900. The paintings are from the 12th and 1300. And then besides the younger Europe, we also have Europe on the other side, which is 12, 13, and 1400 over there, with the wooden buildings. They are all hand-milled and scaled down 22.5% from the original size, and they're standing somewhere in Germany.
Germany, Switzerland, Austria. It's a whistle-stop tour of Europe. But there is so much more which makes this a fascinating railroad. For one, Rudi's trains get their power from a catenary, or overhead system. It adds to the ambience and adds to the unique look. All the detail, the beautiful murals, and the trains themselves give Rudi's home something of a museum feel. But it really is more than that. It is instead a testament to one man and his love of trains.
The A&J Western Railroad simply carries the initials of its creators, Alan and Janet Fox, and that makes a lot of sense. Alan and Janet have been working on the A&J for quite a few years now, taking it from its fairly humble beginnings to the impressive layout which exists today. And along the way, they've shared the work.
But Alan does all the track work and all the train work itself. I'm strictly into the scenics.
And, well, when she's in the scenics, I mean, she has furnished the insides of all the buildings. I have put lights in them so you can see it at night, but she has furnished the interiors and also done all of the artificial scenery.
The A&J was a simple loop-to-loop in the beginning, but it was still unique because it ran from inside to outside. But then came a major expansion. The A&J was running across the patio, then around the jacuzzi and fruit garden. All of that took some serious engineering work.
We tunneled through this wall surrounding the jacuzzi. On both sides, we tunneled through so that the train could run on 2 different levels. One below, through the tunnels, and the one on top, and that governed how high it would be.
Out there, in the back part of the railroad, you get a pretty good idea of just how much work it took. The train runs well above some beautifully detailed farms and ranches. All that apparently wasn't enough for Alan and Janet. They decided to expand again, this time taking out an entire strawberry garden to make room for a pond, a waterfall, a river, and of course, more track. It was all worth it. Again, more detail. That fisherman may not be real, but the fish swimming nearby most certainly is. The A&J keeps your attention moving from spot to spot. There's a great view over here, and interesting use of changing terrain and level over there. Alan Fox got his first train set from his father when he was 5. His love of trains started then and seems to grow every time he enjoys the A&J Western.
I love it. I love trains, always have, and I obviously will till the very end.
How can you possibly argue with that?
When Franz and Lew Fruehwirth were growing up in southern Germany, they would ride the train to and from work each day. Their love of trains stayed with them, as did memories of the Schuettenhelm, a beautiful area of small villages and meadows. And it's all here, all almost real once again, on the Schuettenhelm. The apple trees, the pine forests, the waterfalls of southern Germany, all part of the special ambiance of this garden railway. So too is the quaint village. Lew, a folk artist, made each house, each building, special. The homes are named for Franz and Lylow's grandparents. This building honors Franz's work for many years as a tailor. Lew wanted to make each building different and artistic, and she certainly succeeded. She also wanted to make them practical, and she succeeded at that by inventing her own approach. Each building is painted on a brick.
With buildings, it's very difficult to really find buildings which are somewhat different, you know. So then also houses which are light, the wind is blowing it away, and she just figured if she could take a brick, which is heavy, and she paints it, and it really turned out very nice. She does a wonderful job on that.
The Schuettenhelm operates on 200 feet of track and rolls through lush landscaping. The flowers and the details of the German countryside add so much to the experience. Franz says that he and Lew spend many enjoyable hours on the gardening and the painting. Part of it is the excitement of always creating something new. The other part has a lot to do with keeping the past alive and close to their hearts.
That cottage reminds us of my upbringing. I was born in Hungary, and I was born in a thatched roof cottage house. So these are little things which we cherish.
Cherish. Somehow, when you see the Schuettenhelm, that one word seems to fit just perfectly.
They are called garden railways, but most often they are railroad layouts which come with a garden. Not this one. This is the Green River and Red Rocks Railroad. And in this case, when you see the words Garden Railway, they both deserve to be capitalized. Look in one direction, and you see a fountain and lily pads. Look in another, and there are gorgeous flowers. For a moment, you might be tempted to simply refer to this as a beautiful backyard garden, which just so happens to have trains running through it. That would be a temptation, but not entirely accurate. That's because the Green River and Red Rocks, named for some of Lew and Joanna Gary's favorite places in the Southwest, is really a perfect blend of garden and railway.
In viewing many of the yards in San Diego, we noticed a couple that did have the automatic controls, and that just intrigued us. We liked the realistic feeling of the train slowing down to stop at a station and starting slowly and picking up speed, leaving, and trains passing each other.
Nothing feels forced or out of place. The orange trees belong. So does the train passing on the track below. The fountain and lily pads are somehow enhanced by the freight rolling through. It's plain Lew and Joanna have a passion for both trains and gardening.
We've picked up a lot of miniature plants, and that's proving to be a very interesting thing for us because we're learning a little bonsaiing and a little this and a little that in order to keep them small and in proportion. But on the other hand, there are lots of big plants too that I think just form a backdrop.
Joanna calls this the perfect escape from the world. Peaceful, beautiful, and entertaining. It would be difficult to spend any time here at all and not leave relaxed and fulfilled. You find yourself appreciating the garden. You find yourself appreciating the railroad. But more than anything, you find yourself appreciating the combination of the two.
One of the first things you notice about Bob and Linda Gillette's Yucca and Cherry Hill Railroad is that there are so many things to notice. The detail here is extraordinary. It all comes together in a space 14 by 22 to create a sense of the early 1900s in a small Colorado town called, naturally enough, Cherry Hill. The Yucca and Cherry Hill has two main loops, so two trains run simultaneously. They cross paths, but Bob Gillette's automatic block system works beautifully. Bob's visitors love to study the small pieces, the detail. But there's no question where most of their attention is focused.
I think probably the trestle on the bridge are, because those are so realistic. That bridge was used in the first Del Mar fair that we did. It was an old decrepit piece of junk that was found, and the person that helped me put in this railroad fixed it up, and after we used it at the Del Mar fair and we constructed my railroad, we took a look at the bridge and said, boy, well, that fit nicely here. So we stained it up and repaired it and put it in here, and he built a trestle on the end of it, so that you go from the transition from the bridge to the trestle. It also, I say, it's a signature point of the railroad because it's the place where everybody likes to photograph the railroad, because it's fun to see the trains come booming across the bridge and down across the trestle.
The Gillettes take a lot of pride in their railroad's landscaping. They've become expert gardeners, taking care of the miniature trees and the ground cover. And they've learned exactly which flowers will and won't survive in the heat of a San Diego summer. Bob Gillett says this whole thing is more than a hobby. He loves to get his grandchildren involved, and he acknowledges the railroad has become quite a conversation piece. Of course, every now and then, someone wonders how the Gillettes came to call it the Yucca and Cherry Hill Railroad. The Cherry Hill part, you know. Here's the rest of the story.
We had a great big 30-foot yucca tree that had to come out sometime, and so this was a perfect time to take that thing out and build a railroad around it in its place, and that's why we call it the Yucca and Cherry Hill Railroad, because that yucca plant is history.
Now you know. Feel free to share the story on your next trip through Cherry Hill.
Logging is a personal interest of Doug Meek. So in the South Bay Railway and Navigation Company, trains loop through a major logging town. He's incorporated a sawmill and lumber yards in the 500 feet of track. In his 36 by 18-foot mobile home backyard, Doug has created a very detailed dual looping layout. In this extremely limited space, you're going to find one of the longest coal trains rolling up the grade.
I have one ore train of 21 cars that I have all painted. It takes 3 white pass engines to pull it up the 2.5% grade because it is real coal.
Take careful notice of the painted logo on each of Doug's cars. It's going to take a sharp eye to catch all of the special touches he's added to this layout. Using pictures from the actual tower on the Snake and Salmon Rivers in Idaho, Doug Scratch built this lookout tower that rests in the heart of the South Bay Railway. The LGB steam and diesel locomotives roll over 25 feet of trestles and 6 bridges, day and night. But it's not just running the railway that Doug enjoys. He's been active in helping others work on their railways simply because of his great love of creating and building layouts.
Joe and Hilde Mignone have created a garden railway with great personal significance. In addition to the 225 feet of track and the 15 hand-built switches, the Sulzbach-Gaggenau-Bahn has stories to tell. In the last 2 years, the entire Mignone family has found the railroad a labor of love. And as they continue to work together on this project, new family ties emerge in the scenery. Joe enjoys fishing, so naturally there's a pond out by the Hofbrau, named for his cousin Franz. Each of the hand-built structures in this railroad is a replica of an actual house or shop in the small German village that Hilde's relatives still live in today. This special house is modeled beam for beam after the home Hilde's grandmother was born in. The house built in 1706 still stands, protected by the Historical Society.
railroad is for your imagination, to take it where you want to take it to. I love boating, and I love railroads, so just to try to bring everything that you like together in one little backyard to make it fun. And this is a family railroad. Everybody likes it. My wife has her green cars, and my son, he has a couple of beer cars, and in fact, he has quite a few beer cars. So my daughter, well, she's getting into the railroad business, but, you know, it's kind of taking her kind of slow.
Joe and Hildy have incorporated their family and other loves into their garden railway.
There is an air of mystery surrounding Bob and Mary Newsom's garden railway. First, there is the name, or rather the lack of a name. Bob and Mary Lou say they just never got around to sitting down and discussing a good name. So you're looking at the unnamed railway. And then there's the layout itself. It's beautiful and fun to watch, but it was built without any real plan. It seems the unnamed railway was also the unplanned railway. And when Bob discusses how it all got started, it's easy to believe there was no plan. It just sort of happened.
The railroad started when I made the mistake, or the fun mistake, of buying a starter set for Christmas to have underneath the Christmas tree. The idea, I figured the train was big enough that the grandchildren could handle the cars and the locomotive without hurting them. And it was sort of growing somewhat like Topsy since then to become a railroad in the garden.
And that's a key point. This is a railroad built around and through a mature garden. You see, all of this was already here before the train set appeared under the Christmas tree. The pool was here. The plants were here. So was that back fence. Bob and Mary Lou insist the unnamed grew just like a real railroad. It had to be routed around a lot of obstacles. And yet with the obstacles, and without any real plan, it seems it grew just fine. Who would have believed it? Certainly not Mary Lou, at least not at the beginning.
And little did I know that this purchase would evolve this way. He just casually said, you know, this stuff is really meant to go in the yard. And I said, oh, really? I said, how? With all the plants that are already here, and it just got introduced into the landscape that was already here, and each year it gets added to and expanded.
And it's likely to keep expanding if Bob can find a little room between the gazebo and the fence, or somewhere along the edge of the pool, or maybe over by the date palm. Who knows? All of this might even get a name someday.
The mountainous area between Nathrop and Parlin, Colorado, near the headwaters of the Colorado River, is lumber country. Here you will find the picturesque town of St. Elmo. Actually, you will find all of this and the beautiful Leadville and Gunnison Railroad in the amazing backyard of Gary and Leslie Odell. The Leadville and Gunnison excitingly recreates the Alpine Tunnel area between Nathrop and Parlin, Colorado, high country where the mountains touch the sky. The Odells brought in 6,000 pounds of rocks to build their 6-foot mountains. The result pleases the railroad's main architect.
Well, I like the overall effect of it, and also the difference in the levels of it. We go from almost ground level to almost 6 feet tall, and then 180 feet. It's almost, the grades are almost too much. I mean, in some places they really are too much. too much to pull more than 3 or 4 cars at a time. Not necessarily because you can't get up the hill, but you're going too fast going down the hills on the other side.
That's the way it works outside the real St. Elmo and along meandering Chalk Creek. That's the way it works here too. For Leslie and Gary Odell, the Leadville Gunnison is truly a family love affair. Gary has won several prizes for the logging cars he built from scratch. Leslie handles the gorgeous landscaping. Gary will tell you they have designed their lives around trains. But then he could have probably saved his breath. Spend just a few minutes on the Leadville and Gunnison, and you know what kind of commitment it represents.
The numbers only tell part of the story. A layout 50 feet by 70 feet. 900 feet of track, 40 turnouts, 3 interconnected loops. This is the Red Hawk Railroad, and it is big as all outdoors. To truly appreciate how big, you have to leave the numbers behind and jump on board. In fact, the Red Hawk Railroad is so big, skunks and possums and gophers have been known to make their homes here. And red-tailed hawks make lazy circles in the sky above. That's where the name comes from. The inspiration comes from Tim Rafael, the man up there in the big control tower. As you might imagine, Tim has some big plans for this layout.
I hope to have a little mining area down by the river. I'm working on my farm area with the barn and the farmhouse and the silo down at the other end of the layout. So little by little I'm getting more structures in there, but with the layout this size, and the layout is about 50 by 70 feet, so I've got quite a wide area to work on. And the structures, although they're important, it seems like if I don't watch out for the weeds and the plants, I'll never get structures built. So I've got to take a little bit at a time, little by little, work on the gardening part of it and then work on the structures. And I have friends in the club who are also helping me.
And all that help is really paying off. The size and scope of the Red Hawk leads to some spectacular views. Tim and wife Mo often run very long trains on the Red Hawk, some which proudly carry their name around the hills and across the bridges. All those trains heading in all those directions, past fantastic scenery. It all adds up to a lot of work for Tim and Mo. But then, too, it adds up to a lot of fun as well.
The whole thing is actually fun. Working in the garden is a lot of fun for me. That's pretty therapeutic. I have a pretty hectic job, and when I come home at the end of the day, it's nice to be able to come out and work in the yard and stuff. And it's just nice to be able to sit here, work in the yard, listen to the stream run, and do some planning. And then when that's all done, it's fun to pull the trains out and run them.
And run them they do. And while they follow their rolling stock around the track, they dream dreams. And here on the Red Hawk, you can be sure they're big dreams, as big as all outdoors.
Named for the lake near their oceanside home, Curtis and Katie Roecks hunt at Guahomie Lake for the critters that inhabit their Guahomie Creek Railroad.
That's where we go and catch all our tadpoles and frogs and crawdads and stuff. That's where all the critters come from in Guahomie Lake. It's
So this is an extension. This is Gome Creek. And back there's a little creek with the stuff in it.
Curtis and Katie have hand-laid 200 feet of aluminum track. And being an electrical engineer has come in handy as Curtis designs and configures all of the sensors and sidings that electronically control the train. As one train automatically slows to a stop in the passing siding, the longer train chugs by. Curtis's electronics makes this possible every time.
Next thing was to make it slow down and automatically pause and accelerate. There's 2 little boxes in there, one in each station. It slows it down, stops it. It's a real passing siding. There's a long train and a short train. And the long train always passes by the short train. The short train always sits at the siding. That's pretty cool.
This 1/29th scale railroad winds through heavy vegetation en route to the waterfall or lake. Roecks have a love of gardening. The couple finds working on the railroad a great way to spend their time together.
In 1957, when Larry Rose was 13, he and a group of Boy Scouts went on a camping expedition in Arizona's Verde Valley. That trip may have influenced many a Boy Scout, but it was Larry Rose that was inspired to create the Rio Verde Western Railroad. The Rio Verde has been evolving ever since that camping trip. Some of the changes were drastic, like switching gauges.
And when I found out about large scale, I sold all of the HO scale Rio Verde stuff and just enlarged all of the graphics and built the new Rio Verde in narrow gauge at 1 to 20.3 scale. And it's been a blast ever since.
Tanya Rose is in charge of the maintenance of way, which includes helping in the planting of the conifer to the cactus landscaping. All of the central Arizona region is represented in this 300 feet of rail. Rio Verde is entirely radio controlled, and because of the multiple sidings, it can run up to 7 trains at a time. Larry and Tanya have spared no detail on the Rio Verde. Look closely at the train order stick.
Well, this particular station agent is holding a train order stick. A little Y-shaped stick actually holds train orders. The train engineer looks out the window down the track and blows the whistle for the station. So if he sees him with that little Y-shaped stick, he just leans out, sticks his hand down, and the station agent hands the orders up on the stick, and he just runs his hand through the little triangle and grabs them on the fly.
It's all of these details that make the Rio Verde Western Railway unique and original.
It is not unusual for a garden railway to be described as a true labor of love, but this is a little different. Yes, a lot of hours and a lot of money have been put into building Ken Schuettenhelm's San Diego Alpine and Eastern Railroad, but there's much more to it than that.
This was a kind of a group project started by several of the members of the San Diego Garden Railroad Society in an attempt to get something in for my wife before she died. She died of cancer about 20 months ago, and they came out here for several weekends, 5 or 6, I think. Spent 3 or 4 hours, maybe more, on Saturday. Helped me tremendously because I had no clue how to start.
Ken's wife never got a chance to see the railroad, but he'll tell you the Garden Railway members and all the work they did here helped him get through a terribly difficult time. The work continues here. Part of it is therapy. Part of it is dedication. Another part is simple enjoyment and the pleasure that comes from seeing a project move forward.
I have plans to do a lumber mill, a mine, a small station here with a machine car shed. And that's about all in this area, plus the signs that I'm building now, the small speed limit and whistle and station signs that you see on a regular railroad. More trestles, and ultimately around the back side of the house to another pond that's being built back there, and I should end up with about 400 feet of rail and 17 switches, what we're looking at right now. But it takes time.
Already, Ken has an exciting layout. The natural vegetation, the rock formations, the beautiful creek, and all the changing elevations combine to make for wonderful views. Yes, the San Diego Alpine and Eastern is definitely in the right direction. It is, after all, a labor of love.
Garden railways are, by their very nature, fairly similar. You have the trains, the track, the buildings, the landscaping, and yet each one is different. Each is unique. Each reflects the personality of the people who build and maintain it. Each is very personal. But the Gopher Canyon Railroad may be a bit more personal than most. For instance, there's the name itself. Ask Jan Sidensticker about it, and you get an instant sense of just how personal this whole thing can be.
The name started out because when we first started working on the railroad and I started trying to plant things, we had a series of brush-ins with gophers. And the gophers ate about as many plants as I planted. I think I got half of the plants survived until we finally got rid of the gopher problem.
Every now and then, the gopher problem returns, and Jan will tell you the gardening becomes even more of a challenge. She and Steve have turned the Gopher Canyon Railroad into a true family project. She handles most of the landscaping. He takes care of maintenance and repair. The Gopher Canyon is set apart by its sweeping curves and the long, long trains Steve and Jan put on the tracks. The Gopher Canyon Railroad has another unusual feature. It doesn't confine itself to Steve and Jan's garden at all. They have a spacious indoor train yard of sorts, a place to park their rolling stock out of the weather if need be, another place to appreciate those long freights. All of this is part of Steve's boyhood memories. That's State Route 67 running past Ashippun, Wisconsin, where Steve grew up. The color scheme of the locomotives, that church back there, the buildings, they all have special meaning.
The color scheme is basically the color scheme from the Chicago and Northwestern, the same green and yellow. That was the railroad that ran near the town or through the town where I grew up. And in fact, this town or pieces of it are going to be replicated on this railroad. And you'll see a church after a while, and that was the church next to where I grew up.
The Gopher Canyon Railway. It's a wonderful trip back. It's personal.
Bill Smith's Fire Mountain Railroad is a lot like life. If you don't stop and take a long, hard look at it now and then, you're going to miss something pretty exciting. There's a lot of life here in this 60 by 12 foot area, from the little girl with the gorilla on a leash on the station platform to one of life's simple pleasures. From things that inevitably go wrong in the world to a little philosophy on life itself. It's all here, and then some. Bill Smith started building his railroad after he retired. He named it after the community where he lives, and he got his inspiration at a San Diego Garden Railway Society meeting.
And I went to a club meeting, and I asked so many questions. They said, you better talk to the train guru. And so I talked to him and hired him to design a layout, and they ended up getting to do all the fun stuff, laying track, and I did all the manual work, bringing in 30 yards of decomposed granite to put behind this wall. But I'm quite satisfied with it.
Smith might tell you others had all the fun in building the Fire Mountain Railroad. Even if that's true, you can tell he has been catching up with them ever since. No, Bill Smith doesn't take life too seriously. You can see that wherever you look. But that doesn't mean he doesn't think life like a garden railway shouldn't be handled just right. Nothing has been overlooked. The people, the buildings, even the large mural on the back fence are all perfect, all part of creating an overwhelming impression. Bill Smith has even found the perfect way to change the trains going by. He stores them inside his home.
I can back the trains in the house, and they're ready to come out the next time I want to use them, because I don't think I would have no reason to buy a lot of trains if I had to carry them out and place them on the track one at a time. And this way it's great. They take up 2 rooms in the house, but there are 2 rooms I don't need anyways.
Life is never dull for Bill Smith, not when you're running the Fire Mountain Railroad. He says he seldom travels. Why should I, he asks, when everything is right here in my own backyard? Why indeed, Bill?
Somewhere west of Denver and south of Portland, the Snow Creek Railroad rolls through some of the most breathtaking scenery around. And somehow, it is all the more beautiful, all the more amazing, because of course, none of this is real. The Snow Creek was created in the artistic mind of Bob Treat.
Well, the concept behind it, I'm trying to do an outdoor model railroad as opposed to an outdoor garden railroad. And I'm trying to do a generic 1996 tourist narrow gauge railroad in the mountains, whether it be the Rocky Mountains or the Sierras, but just some generic mountains, and just get the flavor of just tremendous, rocky slopes. A fragile railroad, man-made element, in nature's, Rocky Mountains.
Bob is certainly over-modest when he refers to the Snow Creek as generic. No, this is unique. And if you allow yourself, it is very easy to imagine that you're not in San Diego at all, but instead enjoying the views someplace west of Denver and south of Portland. Part of the magic of the Snow Creek Railroad comes from the incredible realism of the mountains Bob Treat has created. It's a system he developed, and again, in describing it, he's pretty humble.
The rocks are made, it's embarrassingly easy on making it. I take aluminum foil and mold rock shapes with it, spray WD-40 on it, and fill it with plastic cement. And after it hardens, I take it out and prop it up and kind of backfill it with more concrete and detail it out, and then paint it with acrylic washes, earth color washes of paint.
Simple perhaps, but the results are almost overwhelming. This is so very real. The Snow Creek Line, running someplace west of Denver and south of Portland. Someplace that only exists in our mind's eye. But what a wonderful place it is.
You're looking at a bit of history. Not so much in the period town this railroad steams through, but really in the railroad itself. This is the Little Vista Garden Railroad, and it is one of the original garden railways in the San Diego area. It was built by Larry Webb, who also helped found and build the San Diego Garden Railway Society. The Little Vista Garden Railroad is a bit unusual in its layout. On one side of Webb's home, you find his trains winding their way through the perfect American small town. And then you walk back behind his home and find the wide open spaces. All of it makes sense because the Little Vista Garden was kind of a now and later project for Larry Webb.
The railroad was built in two phases, with the original phase being built in 1986, 1987, and that was the section of the railroad that was originally featured in Garden Railway magazine. And in 1989, before the Garden Railway Convention that was held here in San Diego, we started our expansion, which brought us to the other side of the yard. And we finished in 1990 with the basics of that. It was obviously just getting running when the convention for the second portion of the phase got going at that time.
The Little Vista Garden's second phase allowed Larry Webb to stretch out to 500 feet of track and to run multiple long trains. It also gave him the opportunity to plant a variety of dwarf trees throughout the railroad and to build scratch warehouse and mining buildings. And perhaps most importantly, this has been a true family project. Webb's daughter Becky works with her father on the railroad and built the headquarters of the Beaumont Fire Department. It honors her father, a firefighter. What started in the mid-'80s has come a long way over the years. There have been changes and improvements, and yet there is still a real sense of history here. That's just the way it is along the Little Vista Garden Railroad.
People who love rock and roll go to Cleveland to visit the Hall of Fame. People who love baseball travel to Cooperstown, New York. But if model trains is your passion, you come here. There are those who will tell you the LGB showroom in San Diego has to be the West Coast version of heaven. There are a number of things which make the LGB showroom so special. First, there are layouts. One European, the other American. Both were built in Germany and shipped to California. Both are beautiful and fascinating. In addition to the layouts, there is this, a long wall filled with LGB's latest products and innovations. Somehow, that cliche about being a kid in a candy store doesn't even start to do this display justice. But even if you're not quite ready to pick out your next locomotive, you can still get a close-up look at it in action. For instance, there is this sleek beauty, the Lehman City Express, modeled after one of the newest trains zipping through Germany. And then there's the new Uinta Railroad locomotive. This one looks fantastic rolling by, but it's even more impressive when it comes to a stop. It is LGB's first locomotive with digital sound. You can hear the brakes squealing, the steam being released, even the fire doors being opened for more coal. The Shea locomotive, a limited edition model of a classic American logging locomotive, is new and already becoming a true collector's item. Watch all of its amazing moving parts for just a few minutes, and it's pretty easy to understand why. LGB's showroom layouts do a tremendous job showing off the company's versatility. Here, you'll find everything from the catenary overhead power system to an operating cog railway. You can discover the essence of a railway journey through Europe. And also treasure a real piece of Americana. A visit to LGB's San Diego showroom is both entertaining and educational, fun and spiritual. Those people who call it a bit of heaven in a heavenly place seem to know what they're talking about after all.
Okay, so it's going.
It's going?
Yep. So have at it. It can do that as much as it needs to.